I'm definitely more on the introverted side. And whenever I know that I'm going to be meeting new people, in the back of my mind, I'm always like, oh God, I have to socialize. On that note, recently I was at a wedding where my girlfriend Jordan and I were sitting at a table where we didn't know anyone. Our table turned out to be 4 couples who didn't know each other. We spent the first part of the dinner introducing ourselves. And one of the first questions that came up was, so, what do you do for work? Now, when you're meeting someone for the first time, I think it's very common to ask, what do you do for work? And that isn't necessarily a bad question to ask. It's not too personal or invasive, and it's pretty universal. Almost everyone has a job, and usually that job takes up a significant portion of their life. But I know that I find it sometimes hard to give what feels like a satisfying answer to this question. I always feel kind of awkward talking about myself, and my responses to these questions just feel kind of stiff. What do you do for work? Oh, I'm in this. Yeah, we mainly do this and that. Yeah, it's cool. It just feels like kind of a boring answer. And it's not necessarily that my work is boring. I think it's more so that the question doesn't really prompt for a great answer. Unless what you do for work is very unique and interesting in itself, it's kind of hard to answer that question in a way that feels fulfilling. It's almost like it's hard to respond in a way that has a rewarding conclusion. And I feel the same way about other common getting to know you questions. What are you studying in school? Or what are you majoring in? What are your hobbies? What do you like to do for fun? Answering these questions always feels a bit awkward for me. And my response always seems to be a variation of the same boring answer. Oh, I'm in this. Yeah, no, doing this and this. Yeah, it's cool. And the thing is, I could make my answers less boring. I could make some jokes about what I do, or I could go off on a semi-related tangent that's more engaging or more interesting. But at the same time, I don't necessarily want to do that, especially when I wasn't prompted to do it. Especially when I'm meeting someone for the first time. I'm pretty sure this is because I don't want them to think I'm self-centered. So usually I just answer the question that's asked of me. I might add on other things if they're applicable, but I normally don't go too far out of my way to do that. And then you turn the question to them. Oh, what about you? And now it's their turn to do the same thing. Anyway, back to our table at the wedding. Everyone talked about what they did for work, and my own answer was a little boring. The conversation wasn't bad or anything, but as we talked more, there was one question in particular asked of everyone that led into very smooth, pleasant, and comfortable conversation. And that question was, how did you two meet? Now, I feel like whenever I ask a couple that question, it usually leads to an answer that feels very socially rewarding. Usually, they tell it together. One of them will take the lead, and the other will fill in gaps that they missed. Almost all of the time, they are extremely happy to tell that story. Their story. The story of how they met and fell in love. I feel like these types of stories are always interesting to listen to. And I feel like I also immediately know them better after hearing it. And on the flip side, I also noticed that I didn't feel stiff or awkward or boring at all when answering that question myself. I feel like I immediately became a lot more comfortable talking, compared to how I felt when I was answering some of the earlier questions. And it's not just that question. There have been other times where I've been asked things like, how did you get into your line of work? Or what made you want to start doing that? Questions where you're asking someone, or someone is asking you, what's the story behind this? Essentially, what's your story? And I find these types of questions both much easier and much more satisfying to answer. Telling a story of how something came to be in my life, a story that I myself find interesting, feels much less awkward than talking about something that I currently do or currently like. Telling a story allows me to talk about my feelings and thought processes and decisions that led into that situation. And this feels like a much more authentic way to share more about myself and the type of person that I am. By the way, if you find that you're uncomfortable or awkward telling stories about yourself, I also made a video about how to be a better storyteller. I'll link that up here and in the description. Feel free to check it out. I think the other neat thing about asking or answering these what's your story questions is that it kind of tricks your brain into thinking that you're already friends. If we're sharing personal but not invasive stories with each other, our talks have gone deeper than surface level, and we must have already become friends, right? And honestly, yes, that was the feeling that we all had by the end of dinner. It felt like we had really gotten to know these people well in a short period of time. And we had accomplished this by all sharing our own stories with each other. It was these stories that had led to a terrific conversation. So at the end of the day, when you're meeting new people, I do think it's important to initially ask the what do you do types of questions. Yes, they may be a little bit awkward for people like me to answer at first, but they also open up the opportunity to ask deeper questions. Questions like how did you get into that? Or what made you want to start doing that? Questions that essentially ask someone, what's the story behind that? What's your story? And if you ask these types of questions, if you're able to steer the talk toward everyone having an opportunity to tell their own story, the story of themselves, I am fairly certain that you will have a terrific conversation with the person you've just met. Anyway, that's it for today. If this resonated with you or you found this insightful, your thumbs up is appreciated. Don't forget to subscribe for more videos on personal development and self-improvement. And let me know in the comments what questions have led to terrific conversations for you. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.